Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And it's the big one today, The Exorcist from 1973. One of the most popular films of all time at the box office. I think adjusted for inflation, it's like the ninth highest grossing, ninth most popular film of all time. A real phenomenon. This is the film about a little girl who has a devil inside her. Actually, it's a demon called Pazuzu, but I think you only really learn that if you watch the sequels. And a priest is enlisted to help her after she's gone through lots of kind of medical tests that have revealed nothing. The doctors finally go, exorcism, you need an exorcism, you need a priest for this. And they get in Father Karras, a Jesuit priest who is in the middle of losing his faith. He's lost his mother. And when he becomes convinced that an exorcism is required, he goes to the church, and the church gets in Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow. Or I think in Swedish it's more Max von Sydow, and the famous exorcism happens. So, what's your relationship with this film, Jose? I know that you have thoughts.
Well, my relationship on it is that it's one of those films that I was dying to see, because I think it came out when I was 11. And so, of course, I couldn't see it. And actually, it's one of those films that, you know, I didn't really see until about 10 years ago. I think that was the first time I saw it. But, you know, I did buy the novel, right? So as a tween, I read the novel. And actually, the extraordinary thing is I can't remember anything about it except buying it and reading it. I remember buying it. I remember reading it. I remember the way the cover looked. It had a purple cover. You know, I remember where I bought it. Yeah, it's funny the way memory works. But actually, of my experience of the story itself, reading it, I couldn't tell you a thing. And I just don't remember. You know, except I kind of liked it, really. But again, when kind of Mark Kermode went around saying this was the best film of all time, you know, I raised my eyebrow, but really I was in no position to judge because I hadn't seen it, right? You know, but then I saw it, right?
Yeah.
And I think he must be out of his fucking mind, or he was just being, you know, was making a career being polemical about things. I haven't read his book, so, you know, he might have there's a BFI classic book on it, so he might have a better explanation there, or a more convincing one. But, you know, having seen the film, again, it's a film, I love so many elements of it, actually. I love the set design. You know, some camera moves are amazing. I love the look of it. You know, I love the imagery, the kind of film noir imagery with, you know, the breath, visible in the exorcism itself. You know, so there are things that I find really entrancing. On the other hand, there are things that I also find kind of incoherent that maybe, you know, I just didn't get and you can explain to me. And I also found the treatment of the Linda Blair character of, you know, such outrageous vulgarity. Yeah, it is kind of really cynical and really exploitative, and I really despised it. I'm very old-fashioned. You know.
I first saw this film 10 years ago at Warwick Film Sock, and it was the director's cut, which I was aware of, and I was aware that it had some kind of certain things that people found disappointing, like superimposed faces. There's one point where the kind of demonic face is superimposed on the sort of hood of an oven, and it looks so cheap when you see that, and none of that was, you know, present in the original. And also something like 9 or 10 minutes of footage that's really they kind of pad the film out actually and kill a lot of the momentum. So I was very interested to watch this because we were watching the theatrical version as it was originally seen, and I thought that I thought it was great. Actually, I thought that the tempo is really kept up, and I really feel for the characters. What really occurred to me is how deeply I felt for the characters, especially Father Karras, who I feel like I really understand and get. Okay, so it's a little bit sort of expositional where he literally says to another priest, "I feel like I'm losing my faith," that's there for the sort of cheap seats. But you feel it. He's got such a sympathetic face, sympathetic way about him. Jason Miller, who plays him. This is his first film, I think, and he was nominated for supporting actor at the Oscars. I was talking to my brother, and he was saying it's interesting the question of who the Exorcist is, because I watched a couple of the original trailers on YouTube, and in one of them, the voiceover's going, "Oh, when dark things are happening, blah blah blah, you need the Exorcist." And when it says the Exorcist, it's the image of the door opening on the silhouetted Father Merrin. That's the Exorcist who they get in.
Yes.
But my brother was pointing out, well, actually, the Exorcist is Karras, because he's the one who performs the exorcism. Ultimately, he's the one who gets the demon out of Reagan, which I thought was interesting. Like, actually, the focus really is on him. It is about him, and actually, Merrin is, despite the fact you build up to Merrin, and he's a star. He's Max von Sydow, as I said, and he carries with him this authority. What I love about Merrin is how he comes in and he's not interested in the backstory that we've had the whole time. We've had an hour and a half of backstory. And Karras literally says to him, well, don't you want to know about the background? And he says, why? Like, he gets in and just gets to the job, And he's also got this relationship to some degree with the demon, because you've seen that opening sequence in Iraq, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense, but it just gives you this kind of sense of who he is. And then when he arrives in the house, the demon screams, Merrin! He kind of comes in and sets the tone for how the exorcism is going to work, but it's ultimately Karras who achieves it. He gives his life for this girl who he's never met. Literally never met. Like, he's only met the demon inside her. So it's this amazing kind of act of mad sacrifice.
I know. I didn't like the character. I thought, it reminded me of one of those Sidney Poitier kind of characters from the mid-60s where, the priest is like a Jesuit, and, a psychiatrist who's been educated at Harvard, John Hopkins, blah, blah, right? And on top of that, he's a boxer, right? Like, he's got it all, right? But he can't be with his mom. I thought, please. And, I think von Sydow is excellent because he brings such authority, and power, and kind of, just his silhouette alone, which is incredible. I didn't understand the prequel, right? So I know you're supposed to get something.
Oh, you mean the opening in Iraq? You mean?
Yeah, he's in an archaeological dig, and he discovers this statue of what ends up being the devil, and he also discovers a medal, which, then you see in Father Merrin, is it? Or
Karras is the young one.
Yeah, Father Karras. Yeah, and it's the medal that is then given to the Ellen Burstyn character at the end, right? But you think, are they the same medals? Are they, are they the same type of medal, right? Yeah, but the film makes a large point out of showing you that medal in close-up at the beginning, and then actually I still don't get what the connection between them is, right? So, and then that standoff between the statue of the devil and him, which is in a way kind of, quite poetic, I don't get. I also don't get the thing with, that he's taking pills. So does he have a heart problem? That's never quite explained, but you're shown the pills in the beginning, and then you're shown the pills at the end, him taking one before he dies. That is also kind of unclear to me. There were many scenes that were unclear. And actually, again, to me, Friedkin is a great technical director, but he doesn't bring out as many elements as you would like in a shot. So, for example, that whole sequence where they're on campus, where you're introduced to the characters in some ways at the beginning, right? And they're shooting a movie, which I love that scene. Yeah, Ellen Burstyn comes out of her trailer. Yeah, people begin to fix her up. You see the cameras, and you see the huge lights, and you see the huge crowds, and you see people looking on. Great shot. But what's it about? Like, then the whole speech and the shot itself, and the way that the characters are introduced. I mean, it doesn't really connect with the rest of the film. Yeah, or maybe it does. I mean, because she says you have to work within the system to change it. But then you try to relate that to the exorcism itself, and I just don't see the connection. So maybe there is one.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I thought, she could have given a speech that connected somehow more clearly with the themes of the film, or, it kind of, so it looks great, it moves great. Yeah, you're delighted to see what you're seeing, but then upon reflection, it doesn't. You could have made it mean more. I
know what you mean. It does feel like it's hard to make the connections between those other scenes, especially what's going on in Iraq and the rest. And this takes me back to Hereditary, which we saw probably a couple of years ago now. At this point, it came out, and when we had Dr. Matt Denny, on the podcast, the horror guru, as I call him, because he knows about this stuff, and he was talking about, the questions we had about Hereditary were around, are there connections here that are hinted at that we're missing? Is there symbolism that we don't understand? In this film, it would be things like the medallion. What does it mean? How does it function? And, because we found it disappointing that you would kind of feel like the film is speaking in code, and actually if you don't have the key to the cipher, then it's sort of lost on you. I think there are elements of the same feeling here. But what I really appreciate is the strength of feeling, and actually how believable everything. Like, it's so unbelievable for me as an atheist that this sort of thing happens. But God, I start to feel it. I really buy into it. Actually, I think one of the reasons that I buy into it is because they spend so long going through medical procedures and ruling stuff out that kind of they don't just jump to exorcism. And I think actually some of the real horror in the film is in those medical procedures. Like they are. I mean, it's not just in the kind of queasiness that you might feel seeing the blood in the angiogram, which I know people were very uncomfortable with at the time. It's quite hard to watch, putting the needle in her neck and the blood coming out. It's also in the second procedure. The I don't know what it is, but it's like an MRI machine, and it's making these very, very loud noises, and they scream at you on the soundtrack. Like that's violent, and actually it's more violent in some ways than the exorcism itself, because the exorcism is just about words. It's about just saying words, and all of a sudden these words have power. So the idea that Merrin comes in and knows what words to say, and knows the procedure, and just words themselves have power. So they just start saying words, and Reagan, or the demon inside Reagan, starts feeling pain. I sort of...
Well, it's the holy water as well.
Yeah, you're right. So, and I think it might be quite difficult for me to ever buy into that sort of thing, but I really start to buy into it here. And I think one of the ways that I buy into it is because the physical transformation of Reagan is so visceral. Like this kind of thing is not transforming her face into like a different shape. It's eating into her face, and it's scarring her and making her sort of dehydrated and desiccated. And it's very clearly the same girl. And I think the makeup work that's done is incredible to do that. It's so easy to imagine just like what it would look like, a fake head or something, So I think that's amazing. You feel in all the time there is this little girl underneath this that's suffering this. That's this host.
I don't know. I mean, Linda Blair is fantastic, as you say. The makeup is fantastic, and so on. The voice performance of Mercedes
McCambridge.
Yeah, it's fantastic. She does the voice of the devil. She was in Touch of Evil and Johnny Guitar, most famously. So all of those things are great. But, I think the idea of, a young girl stabbing herself with a crucifix in the vagina is shock imagery of the worst kind. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of, it is imagery that's meant to shock, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's cheap, and also I think it's kind of sexist, and I mean, you'd never think of, kind of making a film and having a young, a tween, 12-year-old boy is meant to be, kind of stabbing himself in his ass with a crucifix. I mean, there's just such a kind of a sexist underpinning behind it that I find it like really repulsive and questionable. I mean, so obviously it does shock you because it's a shocking image. It's designed to shock you. But what are you shocking with? And also what for? Right? Like, it's kind of, the film doesn't dislodge any of your prejudices. It doesn't even, put things to account. So, for example, I noticed Karras' mother, has to go into basically an insane asylum because she can't afford a hospital. Yeah, so she needs care and, she's got to be locked up, right? And then, you have the Ellen Burstyn character who's got like 16 doctors around her, right? So, there's a potential to do something like that. The film doesn't bother, doesn't care, doesn't probably even realize. It definitely doesn't make a point with any of that. That's just the way things are, right? But then it wants to make a point with a young girl stabbing herself in her vagina with a crucifix. I mean, ugh. I think it's like...
So what the point is, though, that you feel that it's purposeless imagery. That seems to be, like, is that the crux of your problem with it?
Oh, I think the point is merely to shock, right? I mean, I think... that's all. That's the only point, right? I mean, the point is that this is the most disgusting thing you can show. I mean, I think, the filmmakers would probably say, oh, this is the, because because it's such a shocking thing, this is what leads the mother to call for an exorcism. But you could have shown that in other ways, fuck off. I mean,
well, I think the point of that probably is that it's with the crucifix. I mean, and that it's a young girl, and that it's kind of it's about the most sacrilegious thing you can show, or imagine a young girl masturbating with a crucifix.
Well, she could have stabbed herself. She could have tried to stab herself in the heart with the crucifix. It would, if the story point of convincing the mother that there's something tied to religion.
But if it's about if it's about this demon wants to, wants you to believe there is no God, wants you to question your faith, wants you to think that humans are kind of the worst thing they can be, like that is, stabbing yourself in the heart with a crucifix is not nearly as revolting, and challenging to what you might believe is kind of good about people than stabbing yourself in the vagina.
I mean, basically
that's why you find that more shocking.
And revolting.
That's why you find that more shocking.
Well,
that's why you would find that more shocking than stabbing yourself in the heart.
But I don't understand you, because I think what I'm arguing is that the only reason to show that imagery is actually to create that effect in the audience.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it was the story point that you wanted to convey, you could convey it in other means, and that point would have been conveyed. And actually,
I'm not sure that's right. Like I say, I think if the demon's intention is to shock and disturb.
Listen, we've had lots of films with demons and shocks and disturbings without having a 12-year-old girl shove a crucifix up her vagina. I mean, that's absurd.
I don't know if it is absurd.
I think it's absurd. And it's definitely shocking. And the only intention behind doing that is actually, to create a cheap shock in the audience, which the film succeeds in doing. And it's, one of the reasons why we're still talking about the film 50 years later is because it has a scene like that. But that, to me, it's not in its favor. It's not what makes the film a work of art. Right?
Yeah. I see where you're coming from, but I don't know. I think... I don't know if I kind of disagree with its presence in the film. I don't know if I disagree with what I feel like it's pointing at. What I think it's, it contributes. It still does sort of contribute to the story. It contributes to the feel and theme.
That's just a cheap thrill.
Well, yeah, it's that too.
And it's a cheap shock, really. And
but this is about a thing. This is about a demon that wants to shock and appall people. You have to shock and appall your audience to do it.
Well, you don't have to shock and appall them like that, and you can make points in many different ways. And actually, so a lot of the discourse around the film subsequently is, well, Linda Blair didn't know what she was happening. She was a young girl. She was directed into. I believe all of that. But nonetheless, part of the reason why the film, the image is so shocking is that it's a 12-year-old girl. You're told she's 12, kind of shoving up a crucifix, stabbing herself with a crucifix in her vagina. I mean, it's, and really, I think for no other purpose than to create that shock in the audience, which I think is outrageous. And actually, to have to descend to that, to shock an audience or to scare an audience, is the work of a vulgarian. It both made and ruined Linda Blair's career because, forevermore, she's the young girl who stabbed herself in the vagina with a crucifix, right? And whose head twirled, right? That's what she'll be forevermore known, So, I think it's a child actor who wasn't protected. Yeah, it's a child who wasn't protected, really, both from the effects that the filming itself might have had, and that the subsequent things might have had. Of course, she now sees it as a kind of a highlight of her life. She talked about the premiere and how wonderful it was to be applauded, But be that as it may, in some ways, what bothers me most is just the fact itself. Yeah, that it's there in the film.
Is that the only thing that you think was too far? She says, do you know what you did, your cunting daughter? You object to the word cunt sometimes in American films.
Well, I mean, none of that was no, I didn't mind any of that, actually. I think it was this moment that I still find it unacceptable.
Okay.
So, yeah, the scenes with the veins popping or the head turning, I mean, the head turning, you could just see as fun. It's kind of like, it is a horror film after all, right? And that there are kind of special effects or whatever. But to give the audience kicks by watching a 12-year-old girl stab herself in the vagina, I think is really low and unnecessary. There are many things that I liked about the film.
Yes, let's go on to things that you liked.
Yes. Sorry, it could be a big rant about that moment. I love the way that it was shot. I loved Ellen Burstyn's performance. Actually, I think she's terrific. I think Max von Sydow as well. Yeah, his presence. I mean, some things still seem kind of amazing. So the child rising on the bed during the exorcism, the lighting of all of the exorcism bits. I mean, actually, I like the whole exorcism section. The way that they keep repeating the language, so the music disappears and it's just them repeating and repeating. I thought that was wonderful. I love the party sequence where and actually this made me think, because there's a Spanish film called No News from God, Sin Noticias de Dios, with Victoria Abril and Penelope Cruz. And Penelope Cruz is in hell, so she's a gangster, right, who's been sent to hell. So what's a gangster's worst idea of hell is, to be a beautiful waitress, constantly sexually harassed, right? And then this other person gets sent to heaven. And what's the idea of heaven is, to be a nightclub singer in a cabaret, right? Singing standards to constant applause, right? Yeah. That's what the film's about. And I thought, actually, I wondered if that director, Diaz Yanez, I think, has seen The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a direct reference, because there's that moment when the priest says, my idea of heaven is to be in a nightclub. Yeah. So I love that bit.
I love the feeling that you get every time someone walks towards the room at the end of the house that she's in. There is this forbidding feeling that someone is about to subject themselves to something in there. Yes. I like the idea. It's interesting in the special edition of director's cut, which was made at William Peter Blatty's insistence, the writer of the novel and the writer of the screenplay, because he kind of said, you cut out so many things that should have been in the film, and one of them was the famous spider walk, where she comes downstairs on her hands and legs sort of upside down. It's quite creepy, but it was never put in the original film. And, I think it's something that really ruins the director's cut, actually, because you get this idea that, it could be interesting. You get this idea that she can leave her room, but chooses not to. That could be turned into something, but the fact is that it's not developed in that way. So, actually, the way it functions in the director's cut is just a moment that shocks and raises many more questions than it answers. That doesn't happen in this. The action has to be confined to this room. Despite the fact that she's staying in this room and they've strapped her to the bed and whatever, she has all the power.
I didn't buy it, and I thought it was an incoherence in the storytelling. Again, another of Friedkin's incoherences. Because, when you read comic books and you read about superheroes or a supernatural story or whatever, the writers are always careful to give you the bounds of the world and the particular powers that a monster has, or you need to know what they're able to do in order to be scared or not scared, or here you never know what what this devil's powers are, or why they may be constrained in the bed, right? Kind of, he says it would be too vulgar to break the ceiling or whatever, and you think, well, if he's meant to be the devil, not just an ogre or something, or one of his underlings, or, he is meant to be the devil, well, then why can't he? And it would have been easy to do. You could just say, well, it takes them 48 hours on Earth before their full powers blossom. Yeah,
I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure I agree with that, because I just think that's not the purpose. Like, this demon can clearly move stuff around. You see it doing that. It can clearly transform things as it does to Reagan's face. It can puke all of that green stuff out. It says, it shoots the drawer out, and Karras puts it back and says, "Do it again," and it goes, "In time." So it can do things, but you kind of think, actually, if it wants to do, this thing could just run amok and take over the world. Why doesn't it? And it's because it's about these people. It's not about taking over the world. It's about fucking with these particular people.
No, look, I think the questions I'm asking are legitimate. It's the devil, right?
Well, it's
so
a
why
demon.
Didn't he just smote them all? Well, actually, I think the film goes beyond that. It's the devil.
It does claim it's the devil at one point.
So, why doesn't it just smite them all during the exorcism, or before the exorcism gets too far in the way?
I think that's one of the things that you just have to buy. I think that is one of the things that you do just have to buy.
Well,
actually,
why do you have to? I mean, the storytelling could have been clearer. I mean, it wouldn't take very much to explain why at that moment the devil couldn't. Or,
but I think then fundamentally your problem seems to be with exorcisms. I mean, your problem then seems to be like, well, if surely the devil can just smite these people, well, then your problem is with the fundamental premise that an exorcism is the way that Catholic dogma says you get the devil out.
No, because you don't have an exorcism to get the devil out. You get an exorcism to get a spirit out, which could be many things. It could just be a dead person inhabiting your body. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the devil.
Well, I didn't say it was the devil.
But I think because the film says it's the devil.
Yeah. But I just see, like, if that's your problem seems to be fundamentally with the premise of the film, and actually that seems to be impossible to get round.
No, my problem is with the way that the film handles its premise, which is not the same thing.
So what would it have to do to? So you're saying it would have to sit down and explain the rules of what this demon can do? Yes, it
would have to tell you them in some way. It's very simple, right? Like about like Superman's kryptonite or something. Right, like kind of you're always given the bounds of powers, or the way that powers work. It's essential.
Well, if you're talking about Superman's kryptonite, the kryptonite here is the exorcism. You don't need to be told. I mean, well, you are told essentially the exorcism is the way to solve this. And like I say, when Merrin turns up, one of the things that I like is that he's not interested in the rest of it. He says the only thing to do here is get the thing out, and he just sets to work.
Look, but the film tells you that the spirit, or the devil in this girl, could do all of these things, but chooses not to. Why does it choose not to?
Because it's fucking with them. I mean, you think about the question is, what does this demon want to do? Right? And like I said, you get the impression it can do anything, but it's choosing not to. Right? So it's not about running amok or whatever you can imagine. It's, it wants to do what it's doing. And I think actually part of that premise is that you have to kind of accept that, which I think might be easier if you have some sort of Catholic background or something, which I don't, because I think it probably speaks to that quite deeply, that the way the ritual works and stuff. You kind of feel like you have to buy that. It's almost like a game. That's the feeling I get, or that's the way I think about it. It's like a game for the demon. That's why it subjects itself to. That's why it doesn't just run off and start tearing down buildings. it's a game, and once the exorcism begins, it's like
there's such an interesting and I think very gendered perspective in relation to genres. So, for example, you have a musical. What? Who would sing and dance on the street, right? But then, no, an exorcism. Anything can happen. You just have to accept it.
I never have. Wait. If I ever, I don't have that problem with musicals. If I ever have a problem with a musical, it's not on the basis that people wouldn't just burst into song. I have a problem because I think the songs are rubbish. I think the thing is here, like, if you don't accept that there is some purpose, this thing just wants to fuck with these people, then actually the thing is completely dead. The film is totally dead.
Well, it wasn't dead to me. I mean, I found it, very entertaining and moved well. The ambiance, was great. So actually I was quite entertained by it, and I saw it twice.
Yeah, so did I. I mean, it's interesting that when we said the other day we're going to do these podcasts on, because today we've recorded both this and the podcast on Jade. And I said the other day, we can't do the podcast tomorrow, can we do it the day after? And I said, I'll watch them both again. And you said, yes, so will I. So,
yes,
which I'm not sure that I would have with any of the other Friedkin films that we've seen so far. I'm not sure that I would have bothered watching them twice.
It's true. It's one of the interesting things about both of these films, and particularly The Exorcist, that, I find it both cheap in terms of shock, low blow shocks, and on the other hand, I found it very entertaining, and I found it really pleasurable to watch. And I think I mentioned in another podcast that I'm really drawn to production values, right? And the film is very glossy, and well produced, and kind of some of the shots are amazing, and I think Friedkin, just the way he goes up and down those stairs, I think it's so skilled.
The effects, I think, are fundamental to what I think is so good about the film. The quality of the effects, and it's one of these things that people talk about. Well, they built this set basically in a fridge by the end, so that you could see their breath on camera. So the actors, particularly Linda Blair, who's just in a nightie, is freezing to death. And there's kind of issues around what's ethical in terms of kind of the filmmakers making the actors do that under those conditions, but the effects are incredible. The effect of the green sort of goo, not just when it spews out of her mouth in the projectile vomit, but when later she's talking to Merrin and he's by the bed and it's just oozing out of her mouth, which again was like required this kind of contraption that was very uncomfortable for Linda Blair to have in her mouth. But the effect is incredible. The way the way those shots were, because this is pre-Steadicam, the way those shots going up the stairs worked, to the kind of the rig they had to build to make that work, things like that, are incredible. The quality of the makeup is incredible. So it's an expensively kind of produced, very solidly put together thing that I just, like I said, I believe entirely, and I think keeping that action closed in that room is so important to it. It's this concentrated feeling of evil, that I love. I want to say that I am so surprised, having gone back and watched it, that Tubular Bells became the icon that it is on the basis of this film, because it's not a piece that was composed for the film. It had been composed by Mike Oldfield within the a few months prior, whatever, and it was discovered and used in the film. And it's one of many pieces that are used in the film. And actually, its use in the film is not that interesting. It's used early on, about 7 or 8 minutes in, when Ellen Burstyn's walking down the road, and it just kind of comes in and leaves. And then I think the only other time it's used is right at the very end, where the third priest, who a name I can't even remember, but the local priest, kind of walks off, and the music comes in, and then all of a sudden this horrible discordant score comes in over the credits, so it ruins the music then. So you're going, like, why did this and actually that's why I went and looked back to those original trailers, because I thought, oh well, the reason people love this is because it was on the trailers, and that's why. And no, it's not that either. It's not on the trailers. So it just, for somehow people picked up on this piece of music, and it became this massive hit that's now completely associated with The Exorcist, and it's so iconic and intertwined with it. I don't understand how it became so massive on the basis of the film. Weirdly,
I don't either. I mean, as I said, I came to this film quite late,
Yeah. It's a great piece of music, though.
I should mention that, one of the things that that both impressed me and pointed out to other aspects of the film's faults is, a great deal of thought and care has been taken, for example, with just Ellen Burstyn's wardrobe, right? So she's meant to be a film star. So, she wears expensive dresses, the ball gown for her party. She has this huge pear-shaped diamond ring. She wears Hermes scarves. Like, it's all been like really kind of, really carefully thought through. And then you think, I wish they'd kind of given the same care to some of the other plot elements in the film, right? To be a complete bitch about it.
Do you have any relationship with the? I mean, you grew up in Spain, which is quite Catholic, right?
I grew up in Canada, really.
Okay.
I mean, we moved to Canada when I was 7. So,
but do you have any relationship with the religion behind this that affects how you?
Yes and no. I mean, I was an altar boy, so
Okay.
so yes, but kind of my dad was quite agnostic, or not agnostic. Actually, he didn't believe. And we were kind of forced to go to church until we did our first communion, and then no longer. So, I have that kind of a relationship to it. I mean, I'm not a believer,
Yeah.
but I'm very interested in all the cultural aspects of it, and I suppose I'm intimately familiar with all the ceremonies of it, though not exorcisms.
Yeah. Well, this is something that again I brought up Dr. Matt Denny, a horror guru, and I was asking on Twitter, do you have to be a Catholic to really enjoy or understand The Exorcist? And he was saying, growing up in the Catholic sort of milieu as he did, means that he, as you just said, is familiar with the rite and ritual, and that for him is one of the reasons the film is powerful. He recognises that. I was thinking, like, is there a Jewish version of this that I would get more? I don't know.
Well, the thing is, I'm not quite sure that that's true, really, because, the film would never have been, that kind of massive international success that it was if it didn't also.
No, he's not saying that you have to be a Catholic to watch it, but that it maybe speaks to Catholics in a different way or on a different level to non-Catholics.
But possibly, though, it didn't work too well on this Catholic, but it seems to have, worked very well on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I'm Jewish, so for me, it's about a girl who disappoints her mother.
That's so not the case. Also, though, good joke.
Thank you. Ultimately, my response actually was, I like this film much, much more this time than I did when I saw it 10 years ago, and I think it's partly because this version, the theatrical cut, is better. I think it's tighter. There's less kind of mucking about in it. There's certainly less of that of the effect stuff that they put in. That stupid face that shows up on the oven really winds me up. I think maybe also because I had lower expectations because I'd seen it. I mean, I remember the first time I saw it, I had all these expectations. This is one of the best films ever. Mark Kermode said it's the best. It's one of the highest grossing. Blah blah blah. It's The Exorcist. I remember my mum even would talk about it. Like she always remembered the pea soup shooting out of the mouth, and she would laugh. Like that's something that she like. That's just a moment in cinema that she remembers and likes.
The film is actually, I think that's worth mentioning, because the film is full of moments that still reverberate in the culture. Yeah. Right? That's one of them. The opening of the door onto the room in the shadows is another.
The head turning round.
So I don't want to minimize that, actually, because, the film is almost 50 years old. So for a film to continue to live in the culture in the way that The Exorcist does is definitely an achievement of a kind. I think there's no question about that, and one has to, I suppose, pay due respect. But, and, people who will have listened to the podcast already have, a good sense of what all my buts are. I think, just to turn a tourist for a moment, it low. Well, I can't say lower because it was, he was never that high, but it certainly puts a perspective on my estimation of Friedkin as a director, that the films that are most famous directed by him, which is really The French Connection and The Exorcist. Yeah, those were all kind of era-defining films, if you will. Yeah, they were massively popular, and they continue to be watched, and so on. That I found so many problems with each of them, whilst finding them also, kind of very entertaining and with wonderful aspects and wonderful moments, right? But, as a whole, I don't really rank them as the very greatest of films of any kind, really. Yeah, so if these are his most celebrated films, then it certainly kind of raises interesting questions.
I mean, I feel like I understand intimately, on a deep visceral level, why this film took hold and why it stays in the consciousness, as you say. And I think it is, of all the films that we watched so far, and we watched quite a few now, this is the most fully rounded, the most complete. We talk about like how he seems to have so little interest in character in the other films. When like it seems like there's a choice between character and spectacle, and you always choose the spectacle. Here, I don't think he does. I feel like I get to know Karras.
Please.
No, I do. Yeah. I feel like I get to know Karras. I know who he is. I understand the mother. I understand her. The way she feels and the way she kind of starts to believe that this is possible. And this kind of just like she will do anything. I get it.
All the moments that we talked of as being moments that people still talk about are moments of spectacle.
Yeah, that's right.
The vomit, the blood, the head turning, the crucifix. Yeah.
Well, no, I did mention, what I understand about Karras' character at the start of the podcast, but we haven't focused on it. But I feel like it's that is one of the reasons that I think this is his best film, basically, of the films I've seen so far. This is because it occurred to me to say that it's his most fully realised film, but I think that's wrong, because the rest of the films I think are fully realised as well. It's just that what they want to realise is thinner. There is something more substantial to this.
Okay, well, this is where we digress, because this may very well be his most fully rounded film. It might even be his best film, though actually I don't think it is. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that it is his best film. It's still very cheap film. So a difference of opinion here, but I liked it enough to see it twice.
Yeah.
So mustn't discount that. So we are eavesdropping at the movies. Thank you very much for listening, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Our social media is Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.